TPCSI fans, you want to revolutionize your sports investing habits? Allow me to tell you about WagerWire. WagerWire is an app that helps you become a superior bettor by allowing you to sync all your sports books and track all your bets in one place. See your current action, your betting history, and stats. You could also sign up for sports books and collect bonus offers. Follow them at WagerWire on X, as it's the best account on the platform. Head to App Store or Play Store now and search WagerWire and download the app.
2,000 years long, we will never settle. Hard days, no rain with a heavy metal. No time, no fail, won't stop here. Like a torch to a flame when it burns hot. We won't stop. Come on, bring it higher.
Yourself. A merry little Christmas night. And have yourself a merry little Christmas.
Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. I am the host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and a special edition, Ron Marmolevsky, live from LA. We're going to get in a nice college football and NFL Week 18 talk, and we're going to I'll try to keep it short, sweet, and to the point. I don't want Ron to miss much of the Sugar Bowl as much as everyone watching and listening. So, of course, we just had Andrew McGinnis on talking some NHL. So we're going to do some college football and NFL like no other here. Shout out to our proud sponsors and partnerships, WagerWire. Head on over to Google Play. Download that app. It is free. Viva Tequila Seltzer. Go enjoy a coconut or their new flavor lemon where you purchase and enjoy adult beverages. And last but never least, Atlanta Steaks and Seafood, Terry Smith. Go follow him on Facebook. And while you're there, tell him JD from ECSI sent you. Go over to atlantasteaksandseafood.com. Use the promo code STEAKS10. Get 10% off your full order. So without further ado, let's bring him in. Happy New Year to Mr. Ron Marmolevsky.
And Happy New Year to you, Jeff, and to everybody listening and watching for a happy, healthy, and safe 2025. And we kick it off with a game we didn't expect to have today in terms of, and under unfortunate circumstances, I understand. But we have a good one coming up in about a half an hour.
Yes, we were probably getting ready to talk the recap of that game and who will be facing Penn State, but we'll get to that game in a minute. You and I were talking backstage for a few minutes there. Myself venting, yelling, screaming. We knew 12 teams was too many. A lot of blowouts, a lot of 14-0, 14-3 early first quarter deficits, which in these circumstances, usually for the most part, too tough to come back on. Arizona State, an amazing comeback. Mr. Scatterbo really got the country by storm there. But I want to start where I was talking to you backstage, and that's Alabama. A team that Alabama we know from Bear Bryant to Nick Saban, now to Coach DeBoer, a team we expect to see in playoff games, the Final Four, SEC championships. Stumble early, stumbled middle of the season, and then stumbled late and got voted out. Got to sit around for a couple weeks, get steamed to an 18-point favorite against a Michigan team that was pretty high up on themselves. They had just beaten Ohio State. What happened to Alabama and some of these other programs, the same thing. These bowl games are meaningless, but yet they still got to show up, Ron.
Yeah, in some respects, I thought Alabama would come to play because their coach, their new coach, was the coach of Washington who lost that game to Michigan in the title. And then the players, they lost in the semifinal game. So I thought there'd be some motivation. I think if they played this again, Alabama would probably score 20 points instead of 13. but Michigan would probably score 3 or 6 points. You can't hand them the 5-yard field, the 5-yard field, the 15-yard field goal. I mean, Michigan basically got one touchdown when it mattered and a couple of field goals, but what they do, pass for 80 yards or something like that. We've seen this before. Michigan plays a really ferocious style of defense. Alabama is just not together. I think the motivation part comes from they don't have all of DeBoer's offense yet in gear. It was a transition from Saban to DeBoer. And admittingly, he has some really good wide receivers, but he's going to tweak at the quarterback position. He's going to tweak some of the other positions. They'll get it together offensively. And defensively, that's going to be, we'll see what happens. As the offense gets better, the defense might get a little bit worse. But I thought Alabama would have more motivation in this game, but that first quarter didn't play out the way they expected. They looked like, Milroe just looked like, I don't know what he looked like there. He didn't look like a first-round quarterback, that's for sure.
Well, a perfect segue. During my last show, one of my Alabama guys, Marty Lowe, thank you so much, sent me that Jalen Milroe has declared for the NFL draft. And you and I will do a lot of talking, maybe a couple closing shows on teams and what they need and what we expect during the draft. I will just tip my hand right now. If I am hungry for a quarterback, I know last year was a great quarterback draft. Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, who got hurt, and I'm going to save that question for you for the NFL segment. But I'm not running to the window for Shedeur. I'm not running to the window for Cam Ward either. You know my love affair for like a Nussmeier from LSU, and I wanted to ask you about Milroe. I compare him to a Jalen Hurts type. I know we're coming off of a bad game, but I'm just going to ask you early. I'm going to ask you in February and March and April as well. But how do you see Jalen Milroe's game in the NFL?
When I was watching him play, I couldn't get visions of Paxton Lynch out of my head. And I hope he's better than that. Paxton Lynch was playing against an extremely unmotivated Auburn team in the bowl game and threw for something like 80 yards. And I said, wait a second. If he's going to play like that in a game against that kind of defense, what are his prospects in the NFL? He goes to the wrong kind of team in Denver. It doesn't work out and so on. I would personally not rate Milroe in the first round right now. I think he had a nice comeback in terms of his accuracy later in that particular game. I was struggling to even have him in the first round before this game. Like you, I mean, everybody needs and wants a quarterback, but you swing and miss so many times that it's a problem. There's several teams that absolutely have to upgrade their quarterback, and where do you go? I think Ward is a very interesting pick, and right now I'd have him as my number one quarterback, and I certainly think the Giants or the Raiders should take a stab at him. And Shedeur is an interesting case. I need to see more film with him. But after you get past the top two, I'm struggling right now.
No, and I agree, and I can't wait for our talks coming up in the next couple months. And Russell Saylor says Richardson's lack of success has an impact on Milroe and his draft grade. Trying to hit the atmosphere and hitting enter on actor. I'm having a hard time with that one. Well, I'm going to just ask you quickly here on Duke and Mississippi. We talked about an 18-point favorite, and it was funny because the other day Alabama lays the egg. The whole world's on Baylor, and LSU just steamrolls Baylor. It's that Jedi mind trick. Well, if Alabama stunk, so is LSU. Well, they were waiting for Baylor. Here's Mississippi, a 17.5-point favorite against Duke. Vegas is telling me again they're expecting Lane Kiffin and the Rebels to take it out on Duke. Do you see the same thing?
There's a number of ways to look at this, and obviously motivation is one of them. But if you just went on power ratings, which are dangerous in bowl games and dangerous in Week 18 in the NFL, as we'll talk about, I would have Mississippi as a 19.5-point favorite in this game. Now we subtract motivation somewhat for Mississippi having to play Duke because it's an ACC team. Why does an SEC team care about Duke? And the ACC has been horrible this bowl season. On the other hand, a lot of players have left Duke. More players have left Duke than Mississippi that are impacted. Their quarterback is out, going to, of all places, Corvallis, Oregon. So kind of interesting there. And they have a couple of other players that are not playing in this game. So in terms of strength of roster, Duke is actually less than Mississippi. And Lane Kiffin, I think he wants to pour it on in this game. We've seen his tweets. We've seen how he tried to stand up for the SEC with Alabama, with South Carolina, and so on. I think it looks bad if he doesn't have a good performance. My only question with Mississippi is their wide receiver room is really banged up. There's a couple of Jordans in this game that I think are really good. Jordan Moore for Duke, I have to make sure he's playing, and Jordan Watkins from Mississippi, who I think is a really, really strong superstar kind and a guy who could break out for 150 yards in this game. My first inclination is to say that Mississippi is going to cover those points, which opened at 14, believe it or not, because they expected Mississippi opt-outs. They didn't know whether Jackson Dart would play, but I think he's doing a Bo Nix. Remember, Oregon didn't play in the playoffs last year, but Bo Nix said, I'm going out with my teammates. I came to play college football. I see Jackson Dart the same way. He's going out with his teammates. He wants to be on the field.
Yesterday, wow, where to start? Cam Scatteroo, 14-3. The game's over. Texas getting all set. I saw some look-ahead lines. Texas -2 versus Ohio State and Oregon. Hats off to Arizona State not quitting. Texas, no running game. We had Paul Stone here this morning. That's been a concern. Overtime, Texas wins. Thoughts of Texas, thought of Arizona State and Scatteroo.
Yeah, I mean, 4th and 13, the worst play call of the game was that blitz. You could blitz on 4th and 5 or do something like that, but I don't know why they called that blitz. So it was picked up rather easily, and Ewers throws a very soft, catchable pass. I understand you want to blitz him in certain situations, but not on 4th and 13. You can't do that. And it gave Texas life. They scored on that play. They scored on their very next play when they switched it over in the second overtime, and that was that. Scatteroo I actually like him better than Austin Genty as far as NFL because he can do so many different things. And remember, unfortunately for Genty, who I also really like, he faced practically the worst slate of college run defenses you'll ever see. And so 30 for 104 or whatever he ran just wasn't good enough. I love Scatteroo in terms of his pass. I thought 3.5 was the shortest line I've seen in terms of his pass catching. And with Texas's run D, I expected them to have to use him in a variety of ways. And so that worked out really nicely. Arizona State's a real success story, and we could cover them at another time because they're not moving on. But from Texas' point of view, sometimes they just don't look right. They didn't have one of their wide receivers, Bond, at full strength. Wisner had been banged up the previous game, the running back, and he was held in check. And now they're going to go against Jim Knowles and that Ohio State defense. And boy, did they come to play. So Texas is kind of a strange team, but they've been there, done that before. Just like Ohio State, they're used to these big games. Power rating wise, I would say Ohio State would be about 4 points better than Texas. So we're seeing a line of 6.5. It's a little bit strong, but we know what Ohio State is capable of if they play their best game. I don't know if Texas took the foot off the gas. I just think there's some parts of Texas that, they're good, but they're just not great.
Dogs barking. Maybe there's an underdog somewhere here tonight, Ron. Maybe we'll have to go find it. You get yourself all set up. Keith Jackson would have been all proud getting us ready for the Rose Bowl. A rematch that we know Oregon won and in Eugene by 1. But but we go back a few weeks ago. That loss of Ohio State to Michigan was the greatest thing that ever could have happened to them. Sure, they don't win the Big Ten. Gives them a week to sit in their poop. They come out against a team that Indiana that no one thought should have, not India, excuse me. Ohio State gets things going. Now the Rose Bowl. You blink and Oregon was down 14 just like this. And the rest of the game, the facial, the expressions, their head down, it was a wrap already. And yet they scored the last possession of the first half. They scored the first possession of the second half. There was a game to be played there in the second half. And Ohio State and Mr. Day said, hold my beer. No, there's not.
Yeah. Well, Ohio State has one fantastic portal for wide receivers, or whatever you want to call it. It's not really a portal, but they attract some of the greatest wide receivers. And that guy Smith, that freshman, I heard people saying if he came out this year, right now, as an 18-year-old or I don't know his age exactly, he'd be a first-round pick. He's that good, and Oregon couldn't cover him. Let's go back to Michigan just for a second. I think Michigan showed us something about their defense and how maybe in retrospect, we shouldn't have been surprised that Ohio State didn't play well against that team. Because Michigan, we saw them shut down Alabama for the most part. We saw them shut down Ohio State. But when Ohio State got to play their game against different kinds of defenses, then Chip Kelly's offense got to thrive. And maybe they had a wake-up call against Michigan, and Chip Kelly sat down with Ryan Day and said, I've got to open this thing up. I've got so much talent on the ends. I've got Henderson in the flank. I could do a lot of different things. The Michigan game maybe taught them to open up the offense a little bit. Took them 2.5 years to get the right players at UCLA. But with Ohio State, you have the right players right away. And I think they're starting to play with their potential because they realize they don't have to sit and be tight. They can just air it out. They can do a lot of things with the personnel they have and with Kelly's scheme. And I think that's what we learned from Michigan in retrospect about Ohio State.
And it's a lot of people starting to say it, and especially after that Michigan game, I was questioning what was Chip Kelly doing up in the booth.
Yeah.
But pre-flop, June, July, August, we all had Ohio State as the team to beat. How many weeks did I come on, Ron, and say, I don't see a Justin Fields. I don't see Ezekiel Elliott. I don't see a Marvin Harrison Jr., a Glenn. I didn't see anything like that. But everyone say, hey, Jeff, offense and defensive side, pound for pound, they got the best team. And it's like Tennessee and then Oregon, they finally says, okay, now we're going to show you the real Ohio State, and they have.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised Dylan Gabriel didn't have a little bit more success through the air, because that's the one area that Ohio State let down this year in terms of a lot of completions against them. But these guys have now played, 12, 13, 14 games. It's a long season, but it's getting spaced out. It's, they had a 10-day break, an 8-day break, and so on. And now these untested guys in the secondary are tested a little bit more. They're playing higher competition. So they're getting their experience at the right time. And Quinn Ewers will be another good test for that pass defense, because that's the area. If you're going to beat Ohio State, you better beat them through the air.
All right. 410 Notre Dame, Georgia. You know my thoughts on trusting and respecting the opening number, especially at the Circa with Mr. Benson over at the helm. He opened up Notre Dame -1.5 against Georgia. The money came pouring in on Georgia. Georgia went as high as a 1.5, 2-point favorite. Yet we get back closer and closer to this game, and voila, Notre Dame 1 to 1.5 point favorites. If you're a book, that was a dream. If I got $1 million on Georgia and I got $1 million on Notre Dame, I win $100,000. Thank you for doing business. Go enjoy the game. It's a dream setup for these guys.
Oh, yeah. And you looked at it at first, you knew Carson Beck was probably not going to play, and then he doesn't play. And Georgia's still the favorite for a long period of time until finally there's money that rolls in terms of on Notre Dame and changes the odds just a little bit in that way. The pluses for Georgia is this break is good for them because they've had a lot of time to maybe fix a little bit of their defense. It's kind of been not as fantastic as it's been the last couple of years, a little bit more susceptible to the run, a little bit more susceptible to the pass, not as much pass pressure, but these extra bowl practices and the time that they got because they got to win that SEC championship game was really helpful for them, I think. Now, the big unknown is going to be quarterback. So sometimes you get a read on the props and you say, well, look what's happening. Look what's going on. So I want to read you some numbers. The quarterback Stockton, his rushing yards 3 days ago was over under 11 and a half rushing yards. Today, Jeff, it's 31 and a half. Okay. So a lot of people were thinking, wow, this guy is really going to pass the ball. ETN, their running back, was priced at 1.5 receptions, which I thought was really, really low considering that you're probably going to have more checkdowns with an inexperienced quarterback. Today, it's priced at 2.5, and the juice is starting to go up. So you're kind of getting a read as to what's going on. Even as passing yards went from 171.5 3 days ago to as high now, I checked before the show, 191.5. So you're getting some play on Georgia, maybe because people think they're going to be coming from behind, because you're getting the action on Notre Dame, but you're getting play on the Georgia quarterback. So there's a lot of moving parts going in. And so I understand Kirby Smart, I would say, has been in this situation countless times. So he gets the edge over a pretty good, but there are some game management situations Notre Dame's coach hasn't been perfect at yet. He's gaining some experience there. But if I do the simulation and I look at the matchup analysis, I got to tell you, Jeff, it's heavily weighted in favor of Notre Dame and their strong pass defense. So there's a lot of moving parts to this game. It's going to be fascinating.
I will give you a two-part question here. For Notre Dame to win the game, they will have to what?
Okay. I'm going to read you from my report on Notre Dame. Then I'm going to read you the keys to the game, and it'll be both teams. So forgive me, I'll read it directly from my notes. For Georgia, can they put their own quarterback in favorable schemes? Can they stop the Irish from running the ball? Has the time off been beneficial defensively? Can the pass rush get to quarterback Leonard? For Notre Dame, I wrote that they must stop Georgia's rush attack. I think Georgia's going to try to shorten the game, give their quarterback a chance to operate from 3rd and short or 2nd and short. So now Notre Dame's run defense is a little worse than their pass defense. What happens in the red zone? That's very important because offensively, Notre Dame might have to finish drives. Their kicking has been really spotty this year. And, if a kicker misses their first kick, we saw that with Texas. We saw that with Arizona State. It really plays. I mean, those guys, Arizona State was on their 3rd kicker. Kicking will be a liability if Notre Dame can't finish drives. I also project Notre Dame to win the turnover battle. Now, if they don't win the turnover battle, does that mean they can't win the game? That's a question we have to answer as well.
Lastly, in college, your two numbers, if Georgia wins versus Penn State, and obviously if Notre Dame wins versus Penn State.
I would make Notre Dame, obviously it depends on the strength of the score. If they really shut them down, if they really do something, it changes numbers. It certainly changed Ohio State's perception, the way they won. But if they win and we don't get much change in terms of the numbers, I would think Penn State would be a 1.5 to 2.5 point dog to either one of them. Maybe a little bit more of a dog to Georgia than to Notre Dame, because we will see things out of Stockton that we didn't see before, and Georgia might get a bump up. Barring a big move, I don't see a 3 in either game, but we'll see what happens. Penn State, they've had trouble, we know, against Michigan and Ohio State in the past. But now that they've got a couple of playoff games under their belt, maybe James Franklin has risen to the occasion a little bit. They're two-headed monster at running back. It's really, I mean, this is the third year Singleton and Allen have been together, and it clearly shows how good they are. And that's really an asset. And their defense hasn't let down with the coordinator change. Fascinating game no matter who Penn State plays.
NFL Week 18, a lot. Who's in, who's out. I'll go to the headliner of all headliners, and I rate. When I'm right, I'm right. When I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I give credit where it's due, and I get egg on the face. I did not have Minnesota at 14-2 with Sam Darnold playing not only for the division, for the number one seed, and really the loser of this game could go as low as the 5, 6, or I even saw a potential 7th seed here. Thoughts on Detroit and Minnesota, winner take all?
Yeah, my thought on Minnesota preseason was they would have a tough time early in the season, and then they'd get hot and get to 8 or 9 wins, maybe. You know, the time I was doing a show because I did all 32 teams, like I did one with you with New England Patriots. When I did the one with Minnesota with a special guest, we talked about how let's let Minnesota stumble early and then let's get in and be bullish on them in the middle of the season. Well, they didn't stumble early, and so we didn't have a chance to get bullish on them, but no way did I think they would be 14-2. And this is the one game out of 16 that you can actually handicap without thinking that it's not week 18. In all the other games, you're going to get, like, Philadelphia would never be a 2-point favorite against the New York Giants if we were playing this any other week of the season. And you can pick a whole bunch of those kinds of games out. But Minnesota, Detroit, we can handicap as if it's a real game. And while there are real injury concerns with the Lions and the short week with the Lions, and their defense just seems to give up gobs of points, and I don't even know what the over-under is right now in this game, but it's quite high, in the high 50s, right? If I remember correctly.
I will pull it up right now for you.
57 or so.
56 and 56.5.
Yeah, it's pretty high for this late in the season, winner take all and so on. But I think Detroit will find a way to win this game. And I think Detroit offensively in their home stadium against Minnesota is going to be a tough out for the Minnesota defense. Minnesota's pass rush is absolutely going to have to get through and frustrate Jared Goff, because otherwise I think there's a lot of stuff that can happen. The one negative for Detroit is that Gibbs is not one of those guys that you typically hand the ball off to on 1st and goal from the 2 or 2nd and goal. They're going to miss that complimentary back that they had there who had all those touchdowns. So they're going to have to find more creative ways to get Laporta involved and other people involved, because it's a tougher sell against the Minnesota run defense to run Gibbs at him. That's the one negative. But I do think overall that Minnesota wins this game. Minnesota loses this game. Detroit gets the number 1 seed. Minnesota drops to the 5 seed. I think they are locked into the 5 seed.
Okay. All right. I'm going to have you put your GM cap on. I brought this up, and now I see it on social media this week. Some say, now go back to last draft. Caleb, Daniels, May, and then here comes Minnesota to take McCarthy. 4 quarterbacks, first 4 picks. McCarthy gets hurt. He does, I guess they do 2 surgeries inside there, sits out the year. Sam Darnold has led him to the promised land. What was really telling to me was when he went into the locker room, they poured the water on him, and one of the guys picked him up. They really, really love Sam Darnold. Some of the experts in our lanes think if McCarthy was coming out this year, he'd be the number 1 quarterback. You're the GM of Minnesota. You got a big decision here. You can either keep JJ for 4 years now, or you can field calls and trade him and pay Darnold. What is Ron Marmolevsky doing?
creative contract with Sam Darnold is what I'm doing, because you don't know what you have in McCarthy. I was borderline with where I would put McCarthy. I personally, if he didn't go to O'Connell, who really does wonders with quarterbacks as the head coach, if he didn't go to Minnesota, he had a second round grade for me. He was my 6th rated quarterback out of those 6, Nixon Penix ahead of him with all those starts. McCarthy did have the fewest number of starts, I believe, of the top 6 quarterbacks. And even counting Spencer Rattler, the top 7 quarterbacks, he had the fewest number of starts. I still think McCarthy is a tremendous unknown. Now, had he come back to school, like you said, and gained another year of experience and so on, yeah, he would probably have been a first-round quarterback for me. But at the time, the only reason I gave him a first-round grade is because he went to an organization that had Justin Jefferson, had a head coach that, had Aaron Jones, had a tight end that rookie quarterbacks like. I mean, everything was set up for McCarthy. And so he could learn and grow. But then everything was set up for Sam Darnold too, because this is the organization that could get the best out of him. Sorry to digress a little bit, but I saw Darnold having flaws coming out of college. One particular flaw is that he lifted his feet when he made some throws, and he couldn't get that out of his system until this year. And I think O'Connell has coached that out of his repertoire, out of what he's doing. So he's in a perfect system. If there's any way you could give Sam Darnold like a 3-year, $120 million contract with $60 million guaranteed, and then the next is after year 2 and after year 3 and so on, because Minnesota's going to face either a first or a second place schedule next year. There's going to be ramped up competition and so on. But I do everything I can to keep Sam Darnold, even though there are games that he will be turnover prone, primarily because we do not know what J.J. McCarthy will ever be in the NFL.
Well, it's going to be interesting. Like I said early in the show, I'm not running to the window for Shedeur. I do like Cam over Shedeur, like yourself. There, but the likes of Sam Darnold out there, and obviously I think Kirk Cousins will be available and moved as well. So there's a couple veteran quarterbacks that could be available. So Minnesota's got to, here's the easy way out here, Ron. The Lions beat the Vikings. The Vikings go to the 5 seed, and they get blown out or they lose, and then he loses the last 2 games, then they could say, hey, Sam, thanks for the great season. Yeah. Good luck. And then they move in with McCarthy. But if they get the 1 seed, win a couple playoff games, get to the NFC Championship game, it's tough to move off of Sam Darnold.
Yeah, the final chapters haven't been written for so many teams, coaches, quarterbacks. Week 18 is so important, even for the teams that aren't in the playoffs. Russell's here, so we could talk about Indianapolis, for example. What are they going to do with Richardson? Are they going to put all their trust in the guy who had 11 college starts? What are they going to do with their GM, who's drafted for quantity but not for quality, and they still have that same pass defense scheme? What are they going to do in Jacksonville? What are they going to do at all these places with the coaches and the GMs? Week 18 means a lot for Sam Darnold, and it means a lot for a few other quarterbacks around the NFL, even Geno Smith of Seattle. It just seems like Geno Smith can do everything but get them over the top. And 9 wins is a great year if they get it by beating the Rams this week. But it's still not 12 wins, and it's still not what's being accomplished in Minnesota or in Green Bay for that matter.
Yeah, my love affair for Green Bay, of course, in my fantasy football, where we came up short in the last week there. I didn't need 250,000 anyways, Ron. They just wanted me back next year. The offense in Green Bay, Love. I think it's more now of, hey, we got Jacobs back there, and Love doesn't have like Minnesota's got Justin Jefferson, but they also use Addison. They use Hawkinson. Yeah. Where I think every week for Love, it's a different flavor of the month. Is it Watson playing or not playing? Jaden Reed, another non-factor. Yeah, let's try to get Romeo Doubs. No, we're going to go to Bo Melton or Dante Wicks. So it's just there's no consistency there. So my question to you, we know the Lions, if they get the 1 seed, are going to be a tough out. We know the Eagles are sitting there. My question to you is, there's a team in Tampa that Baker Mayfield's hit or miss, but offensively real good. But my dark horse, what's your thoughts moving forward in the playoffs for the Rams?
The Rams are dangerous. Again, Matthew Stafford stayed healthy 2 straight years, which is a real plus. You can't force the ball out of Puka Nakua's hands. He's been crazily good. Cooper Kupp has hit his ceiling, but you still have to guard him because these guys have such good hands, so few drops. They get Higbee back at tight end, which would be huge if they can get some consistency there. The big thing is the maturation of the defense, and that's still a work in progress. And I think there are some quarterbacks in the league that could mess them up and chew them up that particular way. But they're dangerous. Green Bay is dangerous. There's a lot of dangerous teams, and all my season, I mean, it's been an unbelievable year for season wins, but the one big one that I lost was Tampa Bay. And I got to tell you, Baker Mayfield has had a 2-year run that I just never would have guessed. He's been fantastic too. So as much as I want to put Tampa Bay out of the equation, I think what you started by saying that the Rams, don't sleep on the Rams. But I don't know that you can sweep on any of these teams the way they're playing. It's just a really good and well-balanced NFC. And Detroit has come back to the pack a little bit. They were the number 1 team midway. They had finally got maybe week 8, 9, 10 to my top power rating level, stayed there for a couple of weeks, and now they're sitting 4th or 5th. But it's all bunched up after Baltimore, who's number 1.
All right, we'll go over to the AFC here, and we're getting ready for kickoff, or if it hasn't started, it's going to start. So I want to make sure I get you over there. The Super Bowl or the AFC goes through Kansas City. Kansas City's got to travel to Denver. Denver's like a 9. Is it 9? 9.5? Let me see. 10.5 point favorite right now at the circa. Denver wins it in, and Kansas City knows they're starting Carson Wentz, but if Kansas City was to upset Denver, well, you're opening up a can of worms, because if the Jets beat Miami and then, oh, by the way, Cincinnati wins, here comes Cincinnati and Mr. Joe Burrow, which is a team that no one in the AFC wants to see. So AFC, Kansas City the 1, Buffalo the 2. I can't remember, and I've been doing this a long time. Baltimore this week is now a 20-point favorite against the Cleveland Browns. I don't remember a home team as a 20-point favorite, even for 2 decades with the Patriot runs. I don't remember ever seeing 20s in the NFL. So give us your thought on what the hell's going on in the AFC, and after the dust settles, the way you see it this weekend.
I don't think Cincinnati will get to the 7th seed, but Cincinnati at Buffalo, I would back Cincinnati. I mean, it's Joe Burrow has this team. I mean, he's having an MVP year for a non-MVP team, and he's just doing wonderful things. But putting that out of the equation, I mean, where to start? Kansas City gets the rest, so that really kind of helps them, just like last year, the reset. Kansas City actually won in a meaningless game, 13-12, I think, last year, last game of the season. So, if I were Denver, I would try really, really hard, although they're going to know whether Cincinnati won before their game. They're going to know whether Miami won or lost before their game. So it's a little bit tricky for Denver in that regard. As far as Baltimore is concerned, so they're locked into the 3 seed, and Houston's locked into the 4 seed. What you want to do is you don't want to play Baltimore in the first round. So everybody's going to try to be the 5th seed to go to Houston. Not that Houston's a piece of cake, but nobody wants to face Lamar Jackson in Baltimore in their own building right now. So that's why you're probably going to have the Chargers trying hard, and you're probably going to have Pittsburgh trying. Both of these teams, they really don't want to play Baltimore. And Baltimore probably doesn't want to play Pittsburgh because that takes a lot out of them as well. As far as Cleveland is concerned, oh my goodness. I think once they started making those trades in the middle of the season, they now have 10, 11, 12 draft picks, I think. Don't quote me on that, but I think their mindset is already on rebuilding the franchise. They have a decision to make on Deshaun Watson, but the rest of the group, they're going to try to rebuild the franchise. They are not thinking about Week 18. So even though Cleveland actually beat Baltimore, and I think at Baltimore last year, I think Cleveland has beaten Baltimore even 2 times in a row at Baltimore. I really don't think that can happen this year. I mean, Cleveland is so focused on 2025 right now. It's a joke.
Lastly, I'll set the record straight. Actually, Russell said Richardson just revealed the chronic back and disc issue since 8th grade. I saw that interview too. The hardest part for billionaires, never mind, business owners, is when you make a mistake, own up to it. And this is a perfect segue for me. Hey, listen, I thought Richardson had all the upside in the world. When my quarterback taps out in the middle of a game, when he hasn't played when we needed him, and he's coming out saying he has potential disc injury, I'm saying we made a mistake. I'm drafting a quarterback, Russell. I'll bring in a veteran. You got Flacco there if you want to use him for a year. Maybe take a look at a Kirk Cousins or a Sam Darnold, but I'm going to get another quarterback. I'm moving on there. That's my segue to the Patriots. Getting so many people reaching out to me. Jeff, is Mayo gone? Vrabel wants to come here. Well, I'll tell you this. If I was Mr. Kraft and Vrabel wanted to come here, I'd personally drive Mayo to the airport and I'd pick Vrabel up and I would bring him here. It's an absolute no-brainer for me. He played here. He loves it here. You got the number 1 pick, which you're going to trade back to if you lose this week. Bring in your whole staff. If you need to bring in a McDaniel as an OC, or find a Kingsbury, or find a Daboll or someone of that ilk and start over. But I don't think he's going to do it. He's going to give his prodigal son another year. Thoughts on what the hell's going on in New England, Ron?
Week 18 sometimes changes things. We saw that last year. We've seen that in college. If New England, Buffalo is going to play Josh Allen for 2 series. That's been my projection since I talked about it on a podcast about 5 weeks ago, that he's going to get 2 series and he's going to be done. A lot of the offense is going to be done. If New England still finds, now, if this game was played any other week, Buffalo would be an 11.5-point favorite according to my power ratings. Obviously, it's not being played any other week, so you have a price reduction. If New England loses this game by double digits, Mayo could still be gone. And if I were to hire Vrabel, I would only do it under the pretense that he gets the best offensive coordinator he could possibly get, because I think he let down Tennessee a little bit because he was way too conservative offensively. He knows the rules like no other coach, and I think that's really advantageous. He did a lot of good things defensively, and he'd be going back home to New England and stuff. But I would want an offensive mastermind to take control of the offense for New England, because right now they have a bunch of wide receivers who are just guys right now. There's no really number 1. Hunter Henry had a bounce-back season. Very good. Stevenson ran okay, but nobody feared him. And Drake May is in the infancy of his learning curve, and you want somebody, a quarterback guru or some quarterback coach guru, to help him get to the next level. So I would kind of agree with the assessment. I don't think Mayo's the guy to bring it out of him. If Mayo stays, they need a better offensive coordinator then.
Well, I've kept you overtime. The game is going on as we speak, as we always wrap up this segment, Ron. A nice little 7.5-yard button hook and Ron's closing thoughts.
Okay, well, let's stick to the NFL a little bit in terms of this. If you liked favorites this year over the last 5 weeks, it was really good for you for those. I'm an underdog player, and I basically have struggled to get 50% the last 5-6 weeks because I will play against dead dogs, but in general, my favorites are, I try to find underdogs who can win the game, and they're just not quite covering. So I've had a lot of 3-4, 2-3, 2-2s, except for a couple of the times that I've taken some favorites. But week 18, be careful out there, because you've got a lot of situations where you're overpricing some teams and then you're underpricing some other teams. So definitely read the local newspapers, figure out who's going to play, who's not, and don't be surprised if we see a couple of different outcomes here in terms of where, this was unexpected. Week 18 can be unpredictable. Last thing I'll say is Black Monday is coming in the NFL. So when we get next together and we're talking about playoff games and in the NCAA, we're also probably going to be talking about coaches and GMs. And I think it's important to understand that coaches and GMs need to work as a team. So whoever the Jets get in this combination, it's very important that they get together as a team. If we really think that Jacksonville is going to fire their coach, which I think they will fire their coach after the year, what happens to Bakke, who's the GM there? Because I'm on record as saying, as long as Bakke is a GM in Jacksonville, progress will never be made, because he's bothered that team. I will come on and speak a different positive tune to you if certain teams realize that it's not just the coach that's holding them back, it's the GM that's holding them back. And then what's going to happen with the Raiders? Who's going to have the number one pick? There's a lot of questions to be answered. So I think Monday is going to be really interesting in the NFL, and I'm looking forward to having that discussion.
Black Monday. We have a big show next Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific with Ron, as we'll be talking the semifinals. We'll be talking the NFL playoffs. And of course, we'll be talking Black Monday, how many vacancies are open, and start talking. I know everyone wants to put Ben Johnson to the Bears, but wink, wink, hearing some pretty good information that a potential deal already done with the Jaguars, which would be a shocker, but he will definitely get paid if he ended up at the Jaguars, Ron.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Man, it could be smoke trying to build up that Bears portfolio and that money thing there. So we'll find out anyway. So anyways, shout out to Russell Saylor. Shout out to everyone watching and listening. Of course, a shout out to Mr. Ron Marmolevsky at Ron A Sports. Go follow him there. Go check out his written work at Wager Talk. And also, Ron, your podcast schedule with Chris and everyone else.
Yeah, we're going to go on a little early tomorrow. And actually, we don't usually go on Friday, but Chris had a different commitment and a lot of stuff was going on. So we're going to go on 11:30 West Coast time, 2:30 on the East Coast. Chris and I will start it off, and then Ted will join us. He's got some one-on-one interviews. I mean, that's the beauty of that show. We get some interviews. He's got Marvin Harrison. He's got a couple of other guests one-on-one that he had with these guys in the locker room. So we're going to have some really good audio tomorrow, 11:30 Pacific Coast time.
From myself, Jeff Dawson at EC Sports Invest, the one and only Ron Marmolevsky at Ron A Sports. We want to wish everyone a blessed day. Go enjoy the games. Stay in your lanes. It's only January 2nd, guys. It's a marathon. If you need a new pair of sneakers, go get yourself a new pair of sneakers and enjoy the marathon. So, guys, have a great day. See you soon.